Hi, Ajcu Cc. It's Carolyn Cunningham from Gonzaga. Too bad I couldn't be there this year in person, but I wanted to share my presentation with you electronically, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm really missing that I can't be there. But first off, I wanted to have a shout out to Valerie and Sonia for putting together a wonderful program. So even though I'm not there, I see how much fun you all are having and are still to have during these days together. And second, I hope that you all are focused on the lyrics. I'm not able to be there, and I know that some fun stuff has happened that will make it into the song, and I will be a part of that hopefully in the future. So just a quick background on the presentation. For the past year, Gonzaga has been putting together interdisciplinary panels on the encyclical, and I was on a panel titled Rhetorical Strategies and the Encyclical. And since I am a media scholar, I focused on the contradictions between mainstream media coverage in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then how social media was being used. So if you haven't read it, you should. It should be required summer reading. It's easy reading. In fact, I like to say that I was doing my part for the environment by reading the encyclical on the elliptical at the gym, which is also good for work-life balance. Another hot topic. So quick overview. Laudato Si on Care for Our Common Home has many themes, and the strongest of them is the connection between the environment and social, political, cultural, and economic well-being. So trying to tie all of those things together. And as you know, Pope Francis is seen as controversial, not only because he is a Jesuit from Argentina, but also because he's been pretty outspoken on his help for the poor. So there's three main themes in the encyclical. The first one is the environment and connection to poverty, especially in less developed countries. So direct connection between degradation in our environment and its impact on underdeveloped countries. Second is scientific thought. So clearly he had many scientific advisors with him to help him understand what's happening with the earth, especially climate change scientists. So he takes a scientific approach as well. And he is also real critical about technology and its impact on human life and what it does to developed countries. So despite these themes in the US, the encyclical did not make waves in US media, and that is why I'm focused on new media to see if there was some more of a connection with an audience through social media. So the rest is my presentation, and I hope that you enjoy it. And I'll see you soon. Okay, so again, my presentation is called New Media and the Encyclical. And just as a background, the encyclical was first leaked in an Italian newspaper on June 15th, 2015, before being released on a global scale on June 18th. So there was a little bit of controversy around when the encyclical itself was going to come out, but that's not the theme that really was focused on in the media. The Washington Post and the New York Times both focused on the political dimension of the encyclical, not what the document said, but how leading climate change skeptics responded to it. So leading Catholic Republicans overall primarily shoot it off as something that was political and not something that was doctrine that needed to be paid attention to. And so there's three leading climate Republicans that were quoted the most in the newspapers. And I'll just read the first one from Jeb Bush because this one got picked up by Politico, the New York Times, and the Guardian. And not to mention that Jeb Bush is also a Catholic. So he says, "I don't go to mass for economic policy or for things in politics." And as you can see, Rick Santorum and Senator James Inhofe also had the same idea about how the Pope shouldn't be involved in making decisions about politics. And this could be seen as ironic given how some of the policies related to what some of these people are putting forth. The New York Times had the widest coverage with just 23 mentions and made a connection between the encyclical and the presidential candidates running for 2016 elections. So a lot has changed since then, but really this was the focus when on June 18th, in the beginning days of having this come out into the media. So the other frames that I identified were three different frames. The first one is religion versus science. And that is, what role does the Pope have in making scientific statements? So as I mentioned before, he clearly identified some scientists to work with on this document and did have some scientific language. But this idea that religion is supposed to be separate from science became really part of a debate in the mainstream media. Second was this most quoted idea about a pile of filth, so drawing on Edmund's idea of salience and trying to create a metaphor of how things will get played out in the media. This was a line that was presented over and over again, and I'll show a little bit later how the Pope actually tweeted this out. And this idea is that we're treating the earth as a pile of filth, a big trash can, and that we have to be more sensitive to how we're doing this. And finally, there was a focus on politics and not morality. So as I mentioned earlier, the newspaper articles were mainly focused on the political battle between the Pope and other pundits, but not the moral message itself. And so on the Sunday after its release, the New York Times reported that few Catholic churches mentioned the encyclical because they were not as familiar with it or they didn't know what to do with it. So the political message kind of came through even in the churches because nobody knew how to really think about the moral message that this was going on. And by September, Mother Jones reported that American Catholics hadn't even heard of the encyclical, so it didn't really make big waves. And one reason that may have to do with this missing moral argument could be the American cultural environment for which to talk about these ideas. So as Mary Evelyn Tucker, director at Yale, says, it says that the ecology and the economy and equality are all intertwined, and that's a very unusual mix for Americans who regard these as separate issues. So in our American imagination, we're not able to see how all of these issues can be intertwined, and we have to think further through how we can even discuss these issues. Now let's switch to social media. So in social media, Pope Francis actually has his own Twitter account, and he's been known as the Pope who tweets, which is kind of interesting. And on the morning that it was released, that the encyclical was released, you'll see his first tweet there. I invite all to pause to think about the challenges we face. And then again, he also a couple hours later talks about the pile of filth. And so he himself was someone who was trying to create the agenda through his tweets throughout the day. But not only in social media, we also saw memes. One of the most popular ones was this one, and it shows us a Viking leader that says, "Break yourselves, the encyclical is coming," that this is going to be something that's going to be monumental, that we need to be ready for battle, to come up and confront. So in social media, the Pope is mostly seen as someone who is against the world, trying to battle his critics, kind of a lone wolf on the stage. And the final thing I wanted to point out is this epic movie trailer, and I'll just go ahead and play it for you, and then we can see how the Pope is positioned as a lone wolf against corporations and environmental degradation.
He is a gentle man, a holy man, a man with connections. But what will he do when God's lovingly created planet comes under attack?
If we destroy creation, creation will destroy us. It's time to take out the trash.
A pontiff fighting for God's creation.
Come on, Your Holiness.
Tireless. Fearless.
This Pope must be stopped.
Coal, oil, gas.
These are God-given gifts, and they are ours for the taking.
Unstoppable.
Forgive me, Father.
Nature never forgives. If you slap it, it will always slap you back.
He is an easy man to follow and a hard man to silence. But in this epic battle against climate crisis, we can't let him fight alone. This summer, to save our world, one man,
Come on, Francis.
will risk it all.
Power of me compels you.
Francis!
Pope Francis in the encyclical.
To change everything, we need everyone.
Coming to Earth this June.
So, in conclusion, there's a lot of things, if I were there, we could talk about. One, is social media a better avenue for spreading this kind of message, this kind of global message about climate change? And how can social media intersect with mainstream media? Because in the end, some of the tweets that came out of Vatican or out of Pope Francis himself did get picked up by mainstream media, but in the US, it kind of dissipated, and nobody is really talking about this encyclical anymore, even teaching it. So if we had time, we could talk maybe a little bit more about that relationship. But I just wanted to end there and say thanks for listening and trying this experiment via electronic media. Thank you very much.